The packed airplane cabin, piercing through the chatter of passengers, the drone of the engines, and the already thin patience of tired travelers. Heads turned, brows furrowed, and murmurs of annoyance spread like ripples on water. In the center of it all sat an Arab millionaire, his suit pressed, his watch gleaming under the cabin lights, yet his expression was helpless. For all his wealth and power, he could not soothe his infant son who wailed inconsolably, tiny fists thrashing in frustration. A few rows back, a single dad named James sat with his young daughter, Lily. James was a man who had weathered storms life hurled his way. A veteran who had given years of service, only to come back and face the crushing reality of raising a child alone after losing his wife. Lily, only 9 years old, was his anchor and his light, gentle, compassionate, and wise beyond her years. She had seen her father struggle but never let his spirit break. James gently patted Lily's shoulder when he noticed her eyes fixed on the crying baby. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Babies cry, it happens," he whispered, pulling the thin airline blanket over her lap. But Lily didn't look away. Her small face tightened with concern, not annoyance. She could see the millionaire bouncing the baby, whispering in Arabic, even calling for the flight attendant in desperation. Nothing worked. The baby's cries only grew louder, and the sound tugged at something deep inside Lily's heart. "Daddy," she said softly, tugging on his sleeve. "Can I go help him?" James blinked, surprised. "Help him? Lily, that's not our business. He'll figure it out." "But Daddy," she pressed, her voice earnest, "the baby is scared. Maybe he just needs someone to comfort him. Please." James sighed. The last thing he wanted was to cause trouble or seem like they were overstepping. He glanced around at the restless passengers, some covering their ears, some glaring openly at the distressed father. Then he looked at the millionaire, who, for all his polished appearance, looked utterly broken in that moment, sweat forming on his brow, eyes glassy with exhaustion, lips pressed into a tight line as though fighting back his own despair. James's heart softened. He nodded gently to Lily. "Okay, but be careful." Without hesitation, Lily slid out of her seat, clutching her little stuffed bunny in her arms. She walked up the aisle, her steps light but filled with determination. Standing before the millionaire, she looked up at him with kind eyes and said in a small, respectful voice, "Excuse me, sir, may I try to help?" The man stared at her, stunned. No one had offered kindness, only irritated looks and sighs. He blinked, then nodded, his pride momentarily set aside by desperation. Carefully, he handed the baby over. Lily, with surprising grace for a child her age, cradled the baby in her arms. She whispered softly, stroking his tiny back, rocking him as though she'd done it all her life. Then, in a sweet, steady voice, she began to hum a lullaby her mother used to sing before she passed away, a melody that carried warmth, love, and comfort. To everyone's amazement, the baby's cries began to soften. His little body relaxed, his sobs turning into hiccups, then into quiet breathing. Within minutes, he nestled against Lily's shoulder, fast asleep. The cabin was silent. Passengers who had been annoyed now watched in awe. Some smiled, others wiped away unexpected tears. James, sitting back in his seat, felt his chest tighten with pride. That was his daughter, compassionate, brave, and filled with a love that money couldn't buy. The millionaire's eyes glistened. He swallowed hard, watching as this small girl succeeded where he, with all his wealth, had failed. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a silk handkerchief to dab his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, his accent thick, his voice breaking. "You are an angel." When Lily returned to her seat, the baby still peacefully asleep in the father's arms, the man turned to James. "Sir, I am indebted to you. To your daughter. She has done what no one else could." James smiled humbly. "She just has her mother's heart. That's all." The rest of the flight passed in peace, but the story didn't end there. When the plane landed, the millionaire approached James and Lily once more. This time, his presence was less intimidating, more human. He crouched down in front of Lily, looking her in the eyes. "You reminded me today," he said softly, "that kindness is the greatest wealth of all. Money cannot buy what you gave me and my son in that moment." He slipped a card into James's hand, his name embossed in gold. "Please, allow me to return this blessing. Not with money, but with opportunity. You and your daughter deserve more than struggle." James hesitated, not one to accept charity. But something in the man's sincerity told him this was not pity, but gratitude. He nodded quietly. That day marked the beginning of an unlikely friendship, a bond between two fathers from worlds apart, brought together by the simple, selfless act of a little girl who saw beyond frustration and chose compassion. So, if you've stayed with me till the end of this story, let Lily's act remind you of something powerful. Kindness costs nothing, yet it can change everything. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because more stories like this, filled with hope, love, and humanity, are waiting for you.